Felicity, Ankur, thank you so much for coming to the show. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us.
So Felicity, you are the Connected Vehicles and IoT lead for Motability. Can you unpack that for us? What does that mean?
Yeah, sure. So I work within the innovation team at Motability Operations. So we look at future mobility and how we get our customers into electric vehicles successfully. And I'm also responsible for delivering our connected vehicles strategy.
Awesome. And Ankur, you are a customer delivery architect who's been working with Motability for a long while now. Can you tell us what your relationship is like and what you've been doing with the Motability team?
Yeah, I work for professional services, AWS professional services, and my role mainly is customer architecture and strategy. And we kicked off this program together with Motability. I mean, when they started working on this data journey, they came to us for a point of view, and since then we got engaged, and it's been like a couple of years of journey together.
Yeah, it's been a great journey.
So we started with small program. And then now there are actually, it's becoming a company-wide initiative within Motability Operations.
So can you tell us about the scale and the relationship that you have with your customers?
Yeah. So we're quite big. So we currently serve just over 700,000 customers.
Wow, okay.
And that's just within the UK.
And there's 2 million eligible.
Yes.
So you're covering a third of the people who are eligible in the UK.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's some good coverage.
That is big, yeah.
Yeah, and I think as part of that, we make up, I think at the moment, about 13% of new car registrations.
Wow.
And about 10% of the used car market. But that scale really allows us to deliver that value to our customers and sort of leverage that scale. We also have really, really high customer satisfaction scores, which we're very proud of.
Actually, that's a good point that you mentioned customer satisfaction scores, because I was wondering, since you are governed by a charity, most organizations, they look at revenue, they look at bottom line. What are the KPIs that you're looking at? How are you measuring your success?
It's a great question. So we have a real mix of KPIs. So we have things around sustainability. Obviously, we want to be able to continue to provide the scheme to customers both now and in the future. And that's carefully balanced with customer satisfaction and making sure that we're offering the right solutions and products for our customers and that we're offering excellent customer service.
Okay, great. So it's really purely about the recipients of this benefit and how they are impacted by the value prop that you're offering.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. So can you tell us a bit about your data journey? I mean, we want to unpack that a little more. Doing this at scale, 700,000 customers, can't be easy. So how's that been like for you?
So I think when it comes to connected data, you're right. The fact that we have 700,000 vehicles is a challenge.
They're all connected?
No, sadly not.
Okay.
And to that point, I guess they're not all currently connectable. So I think part of it is understanding what we can do now, what we can do in the future, and I guess also what we can do to plug the gaps. Yeah. So when we started on the journey, we started to look at where we can get the data. So potentially you can get it directly from the manufacturer, or from a data hub, or someone that aggregates a number of manufacturers together. Yeah. I think another sort of part of that is that even if you're getting some form of standardization, from the data hub, the manufacturer is still offering different data points, so it's quite challenging. But we knew that we wanted to start to leverage some value and to start to explore what we could do with connected data. So we came up with a couple of initial use cases. So one was customer focused and one was focused around helping our remarketing division. So again, it's that kind of balancing of making sure we're commercially sustainable, but also delivering an amazing proposition. So the customer part, we used some anonymized data. And we did a customer segmentation piece of work where we started to understand how customers use their vehicles, I guess as part of things like working out how we transition to EV in a really smooth way. And the other use case was around getting odometer readings. So happy path, we don't see our cars. They're ordered, they go to the dealer, the customer takes them, and then we don't see them when they come back. We just sell them directly from the forecourt. So having visibility of our cars is really...
Sorry, the forecourt?
Sorry, the dealer forecourt. Not like a petrol forecourt. So so happy path, we don't see them, but obviously what that means is that you just don't have as much visibility. Now some of those cars will get routed to an auction house or a refurb centre, but the vast majority don't. They just go back to the dealer and then we sell them via our online platform. So things like odometer readings, they're entered manually by a human throughout the life of the vehicle, and even when the vehicle's handed back, it's still a dealer. Now, humans normally mean human error. So if you think we sell potentially around 200,000 cars a year, you don't have to have many that are wrong for it to start to become a real sort of challenge. So we have processes to sort of try and pick up discrepancies. But I think fundamentally what we said is, could we just get the car to tell us what the odometer reading is?
Okay.
Does that smooth the process? Does it make us able to sell the cars quicker? And both of those initial use cases had really, really interesting findings. So the odometer one particularly, we're now scaling. So we're doing a scale trial with a much higher volume of vehicles, and we're going to run that over a period of months. And the customer insight one was just really incredible, actually. It was the first time we've ever really been able to truly see how customers are using their cars.
Sure.
And we were able to, because we were doing it in an anonymized way, we were able to sort of ensure we maintained privacy, which was fantastic.
Awesome.
And just to add about odometer reading, it's not just reading was only the first step.
Yeah.
The next step was estimating that by the end of the lease, how much car would have been driven to have a more accurate reselling price at the time of auction. Otherwise, once the car has hit the end of the lease, you don't have time to negotiate. So it's basically estimating in advance and negotiating with the reselling vendor. And that was the point around optimizing the cost of resale.
So you're not only using data in this way for you to optimize the specific business operation, it's also to maximize the salvage value of the vehicle in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, to your point, residual value is, really, really important for leasing companies. And I think odometer was just the start. I'm hopeful that there's lots of other kind of insights that long term we would be able to get from the vehicle throughout its life. Yeah.
So I want to come back to these use cases, but first I want to take a step back and think, at the beginning of this journey, what was your involvement like, Ankur? And when you came, what did the landscape look like?
And it's very interesting. It's Motability actually thought of these use cases, and they came to us with having a point of view.
Okay,
guys, what can you suggest? What do you think of these use cases? And we love the idea. We love the idea that there was a credibility to do something with bias for action. But what we did is we actually elevated the pitch. We said, let's not just do the use case like a POC, which just gets used very localized or may not get used. So we elevated the pitch and started thinking about all the peripheral activity which is required for holistic data strategy. So even though we are thinking small, but we wanted to think big alongside. So when Motability came to us, it was, we give you the answer of what you're asking. This is how it can be done using professional services. But we also said, let's start thinking about what are the other aspects which will enable easy adoption, which will enable fast tracking of more customer involvement, more technology plus business involvement, and how you will be able to scale as soon as the POCs are done.
So just to clarify, when you started partnering with Felicity, the ideas were there, but you were trying to propose on top of the use cases, what are the things that organizations actually need to do? A checklist of even maybe little things that you don't think about, or big things that may have been not taken account for into the original plan, to actually make this successful from start to finish, including governance, culture, people, processes.
Absolutely. It was that let's immediately start with the use cases. We know what needs to be done. We actually scoped. We said, this is the type of team we'll be providing you. But at the same time, we'll also start thinking about culture. We'll start thinking about how to engage with the stakeholder. So all those operating aspects, and start thinking about in advance that how would we scale this into production? How would we make sure that there is an ability to adopt these use cases? So odometer reading, there's no point just estimating it or reading it. It's about how to integrate with the end system, so that when you're talking about auctioning the vehicle, you're able to make use of that information. There are algorithms, there are output available in the front ends to be able to do that.
Yeah, and by doing that, I think we've really laid the foundation. So now that we've completed the proof of concept, we're kind of ready to go, whether that's a scale trial or whether we want to start building a business case. Is a good way to approach things.
So you had a roadmap and a plan.
We didn't immediately have a roadmap, but we knew what needed to be done to create a roadmap. We wanted to make sure that when we start, this is only a start of the flywheel for Motability. We wanted to make sure that once this is done, there is a path available to serve not just these two use cases, but other use cases and other parts of the business as well.
Sure. Felicity, you mentioned talking about building the business case. I mean, for these two use cases, I can imagine it must have taken a lot of effort and commitment from your team at Mobility. So what was that like in terms of building the business case? When was the opportune time, and how did you build it out, and to who?
So, I mean, I think we haven't started to do that yet, really.
Okay.
The challenge ahead of us is vast, and there's a lot of
Okay.
different use cases. And I think it's worth saying that at the moment, the cost is fairly prohibitive in terms of kind of plugging in the whole fleet. We're kind of looking at tens of millions. And I think that ultimately what we need to do is kind of work out the value of the data and all of those different use cases and how do they stack up, and then make the kind of the cost of the data balance. And we've been exploring kind of different ways of getting data as well as part of that. I think some use cases, so they were our first initial use cases. Yeah. We started then to say, well, actually, that was great. You know, we've proved out some real value. What can we do next? So we said, well, actually, kind of in line with our company values, we want to go after something that really enhances the customer experience. Yeah. So we decided to tackle maintenance and specifically breakdowns. So, you know, we can get customers on the road, but obviously, unfortunately, vehicles break down. And that's a pretty poor experience for anyone. So we started to think, well, can we use the data and can we leverage kind of AI to start to deliver some really interesting solutions? And that's where I guess predictive and proactive maintenance came from.
And this is a very unique case where the business case depends quite a lot on the cost of acquiring this data. So for most of the organization, when we talk about data strategy, the data is in-house or data is actually held in some applications, some systems. In this particular case, the complexity here is that there are 400 odd models that Motability has, and they come from close to 40 manufacturers. And there is acquiring this data from all these vehicles is actually cost prohibitive. You know, we did a number of cost calculations for building the business case, and hence when we started the POC, we didn't start with the entire fleet. We cherry picked. We picked the vehicles where the data was easily available. And then we started, okay, let's show the value, and then we'll build the entire business case for covering the entire fleet. So doing it, you know, once the data has landed, manipulating, housing it, putting it in the platform and generating insight, that's slightly an easier part. But getting this data itself was the most complex and costly affair for building these business cases. Hence, we started small and then scale it later for our entire fleet.
So if the quantitative business case is still being built, how did you get the rest of the organization behind you? I mean, was it about convincing them that we're going to experiment and we'll show you the results of the POC? Or was it more about the qualitative measurement of the business value? Like, we hypothesized that the CSAT will improve because of 1, 2, 3, and, you know, we need you to trust us to do this, and we will show you the value once we build an MVP out.
I think it always starts with a degree of trust, right? And I think it's fair to say that, you know, across, I'm sure, all large organizations, there's some people who are really on board with kind of data and, you know, particularly new sources of data, and there's some people who are perhaps a bit less confident. So I think that there's definitely an element of trust. I mean, one of our sort of core principles is that we want to build a data flywheel, so that we start to deliver value early. So we're not just placing some huge bet. We're saying, to Ankur's point, can we break off some chunks and deliver some value and then kind of reinvest that in order to purchase more data? I think... you say qualitative. I think certainly unplanned events like breakdowns feels like, to me, a safe bet in terms of improving the customer experience. It's a pretty horrible experience to break down by the roadside.
Of course, I'm sure you get a lot of customer calls. They're angry. They want help. They need...
Well, I mean, for anyone, right? Breaking down on the roadside is just a really horrible experience. And I think beyond that as well, you know, fixing things before they become really big problems is really good. So, I mean, we've just completed a large 6-month trial with 10,000 customers. So we built a number of machine learning models. It's about consuming a combination of Ford and Stellantis data. And we ran the trials for about 10 months, and the models performed incredibly well. So they successfully predicted more than half of the breakdowns at least 24 hours before they occurred.
Wow,
which is just an incredible outcome, right? And certainly probably better than I could ever have imagined. And on top of that, there were instances where we were able to kind of get hold of the customer before the vehicle broke down and make proactive interventions. So kind of put them into the dealer or send out a breakdown patrol to stop it from happening. So really, really exciting.
And you can imagine the
Yeah.
customer segment that Motability serves.
Yeah.
The breakdowns becomes even more critical.
Yes.
Because you're almost taking away the ability to
For them
be
to
mobile.
move. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So customer satisfaction, especially for these kind of use cases, is so critical for Motability.
Sure.
And coming back to your earlier point about how did you all start and build the trust, it was definitely doing these use cases, plus at the same time showing the art of the possible to the business. That it's not just about these use cases. Once this data, connected car data, is obtained and merged with all the CRM and other data that exist in the organization, what are the possibilities? It has possibilities around optimization, customer experience, doing a lot of segmentation, knowing customer behavior, driving behavior, enabling them to plan charging points, car parking. So there are plethora of benefits that we could actually demonstrate to the business that there are no quantitative benefit immediately, but the value of data for the future use cases is immense. And that's what got the trust. And we had the funding to continue with these trials and POCs.
Yeah, and I think you can start to put, this is where we start to see the numbers, right, in the output of the trial. So, there is a cost associated with the vehicle breaking down. There's a cost associated with providing continuous mobility. So offering somebody a hire car or a taxi. So this is where you start to see, like, you're right, there's green shoots of value.
I think it's an important learning. And the reason that I come back to this question is because, you said it starts with trust, but there are a lot of organizations who there's a lot of internal resistance to change, or they need to see the ROI up front, especially if, let's say, they're procurement or CFO driven. So what would you advise to somebody who's trying to do, the great things that you've done in Motability, and they don't necessarily have that kind of trust from the rest of the organization, or they're facing resistance?
Yeah, I think it's a balance of trust, isn't it? And the fact that what we're doing is completely aligned with what Motability Operations aims to deliver, which is worry-free mobility, a sustainable proposition, and kind of like a world-beating offering in terms of value. So I think as long as what you're delivering is kind of aligned with what the company is trying to achieve, then you're you're on the right foot, aren't you? And you're in a good place. But I do think that sometimes there has to be an element of conviction in what you know. So if you think you can see some value, it's definitely worth going out after. I guess the counter to that is that you have to start small. So you can't go out and make a huge bet. You need to start small, prove out some value, and then kind of build on that iteratively. And that's how we approach kind of everything that we're doing.
Correct. I mean, we also had some resistance within the organization. Resistance or lack of buying, for example. But like Flick said, had a conviction, got along or got the people involved who could sponsor, who could see the value, and just with conviction carried on. We were not spending huge amount of money, and hence delivering continuous results and continuously getting those demonstrations buy-in actually helped getting. I won't still call this everybody, because there are still pockets, who can still come on board, but my large majority, got into this.
So what I'm hearing is, number one, make sure that what you're proposing is aligned squarely with the vision and the strategy and the KPIs of the business. Number two, conviction and persistence. You have to be convinced that this is going to deliver value, so you have to be the one to go after it.
Absolutely.
And the third part, de-risk it for them. Make the proof of value small with an asymmetric upside for them if it works out, and a very contained downside if it doesn't. And if you have those three things, you can start to rotate that data flywheel. Is that about right? Okay.
Precisely. Considering those aspects, and don't just get too narrowed down with certain use cases. Make sure that the holistic view, or the big picture always is there in your mind. Where you want to all go to, because people will only customers or stakeholders will only follow you when they don't see, okay, are you just going to deliver this? No, we have big other plans in mind as well.
Right. So you're starting small, yes, but it has to fit in almost as a milestone to a larger initiative that nobody else has maybe had the audacity to attack. And you're showing them the way, and you're showing them that if this first small milestone succeeds, we'll get this bigger fish that you've always wanted to get, but nobody took the initiative.
Correct.
Right. So I think we talked a lot now about the what, which is great, but I want to talk to you about the how, right? How did you set this up? Did you build like a center of excellence? What did the teams look like? I mean, let's get a bit tactical here,
Yeah, and it's a very good question because when we all started, Motability did not have a data team.
Okay.
Okay, so
Oh, so
when
you
we
had the use cases, but no team, and you still wanted to
exactly
achieve that goal.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number 2, persistence.
Yeah, we need an
Awesome.
anchor. Yeah.
All right.
So our first aim was
Yeah.
to make sure that we start with acceleration. We start quickly building this, and hence, professional services came in handy. That we put a team together of data scientists, data engineers who could get this data, do all the massaging, start working on the POC. But at the same time, we started working to make sure that there is a continued maintenance and augmentation by Motability.
Okay.
So that they don't remain reliant on getting these services all the time. It's basically, there needs to be in-house capability. So the focus was that put this on the ground, get this accelerated by us, and then we started talking about how do we structure the team so that you can work with some kind of a core flex model where Motability does the further development, but at the same time, whenever there is a requirement, professional services was there. And some roles we continued, like mine and a couple of others who could just provide continuous advisory on this journey.
So Felicity, I mean, that's a very good point because I'm sure you know that, I'm sure you've experienced the acquisition and development of talent is one of the hardest things in any organization, right?
Yeah.
How did you manage that, especially in the context of starting with no data team at the beginning? Did you ask for volunteers from other parts of the org who wanted to maybe, do something different? Did you hire new people? What was the transition like? How did you make that a part of the Motability DNA?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think to Ankur's point, you're right. It's a slow process to build out teams, and particularly if you want teams who are going to work with kind of cutting edge tech and do new things. So I guess bringing in the ProServe team, the connected vehicles team, I guess was almost exclusively ProServe initially. And that meant we could kind of just get on with it. And to our earlier points, it's that speed and delivering some value as quickly as possible that's sort of critical to success. So we really only had a couple of MO people at the start. So I think maybe a platform person and a product manager, and the rest of it was exclusively AWS. And then we've worked very closely with Ankur to sort of understand what a future team looks like and what kind of capabilities we need to build into that.
Yeah. So we picked some roles where the internal business knowledge was required, business or the platform knowledge was required, like product manager, platform lead within Motability. But we made sure all the development skills, like to your question, we started planning it from outside. So we help, after putting the structure, what are the kind of skill set that is required, how to source and interview those skill sets. So those are the things, we planned to start. And now I think what is the big team size?
Well, yeah, I mean, and now it's kind of flipped.
Exactly. Maybe if you can throw some light as to how it is flipped now.
Well, I mean, we've been able to recruit people in. So we've got kind of this funny blended data team now. We've got like a software engineer in there, and we've got like a couple of engineers, a couple of data scientists, a machine learning engineer. And it will flex and change as, some of these use cases evolve. But we're predominantly Mo now. And I think what I can see absolutely is AWS offering the flexibility in the future. So say we've built the business case and we've got something we want to scale substantially. I don't want to recruit loads and loads of people to do that, but we can hopefully work with ProServe to help support that demand.
Sure.
And that was the point that, when we start small, we didn't want to add a lot of headcounts in MO. Otherwise, it's unlikely to get all that kind of an approval. So we are exploring models where we can provide flexibility from ProServe, while MO has a core team that retains the knowledge, that helps that team together. Tech come from ProServe and the business knowledge come from Motability. That's how we are partnering on this going forward as well.
And what we've seen now as well is kind of there are data teams or data science teams starting to emerge in other parts of the business. So I think it's going to be a case of how does that all start to come together and work in a collaborative way.
So you talked a lot about, data scientists and machine learning engineers, which are the tip of the spear for these business cases, for sure, because that's where the value is. But what about all of the data engineering work before? I mean, you had said you had 40 manufacturers. So acquiring the data, putting it in a data lake or a data warehouse, cleansing it, getting it ready for the machine learning engineers to even use, right? What was that like, and how did you manage that?
Go
That's
on,
an-
you go.
Yeah.
That's an amazing question,
Yeah.
actually, because we actually explored a number of options. That
Okay.
do we do it all ourselves? Having
Yeah.
handled
I
this
mean,
complexity
you
of
don't want to boil
standard.
the ocean, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do we actually just get everything, all the data from these manufacturers and
Yeah.
standardize ourselves? Or the second approach was start thinking about some aggregators who
Right.
have already done a bit of an standardization. So we
Okay.
spent some time making a choice between the two options.
Yeah.
There are some marketplaces. We spoke to close to 8 marketplaces in total who
Yeah.
could do a bit of an
Okay.
standardization or data sourcing for us.
Sure.
But the challenge is that none of these actually provide a comprehensive view, or they cover the
Yeah.
entire fleet that
Yeah,
MO
yeah.
has. So we are converging to an option that we'll probably go with the first model by
Yeah.
putting a dongle in the car
Sure.
and getting all this data and then standardizing ourselves, doing a level of standardization. Some of the AWS services that we have around IoT are actually going to help do a bit of standardization themselves. But
Sure.
beyond that, it'll be, yes, data engineer or doing that left-hand side part of a data
Okay.
platform that will be done. But we're not thinking of doing it entirely for the entire fleet immediately. We will gradually add vehicle. That is what is going to be the plan going forward.
So you got creative and prioritized, basically. Is there an easier way to do this? Can we go for a good enough approach instead of a perfect approach,
Yeah.
so that we can get things moving? And then
Absolutely.
later, when we have the team in place, when the business case is completed, if we really have a need for the incremental value that will come from sourcing everything directly, then we invest in that. Otherwise, we can just go with this approach.
Yeah, I think, there is never an approach we had, let's
Yeah.
make it 100% perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because you can't, it's impossible to get, it's very difficult to actually, go to to cover the last vehicle, that you
Yeah.
have. So
Yeah.
we took that approach of sorting it out, cover the entire ways where
Yeah.
the obtaining the data was easier, and then build it gradually on top of it. And that's the basis of the business case that we'll put together.
Yeah, I think your device point is an interesting one though,
Yeah.
because I guess whilst we have this stream of work that it's
Yeah.
the use cases and how we can deliver the value, we also do need to consider if we get to the point where we want to be able to,
Yeah.
to plug in the whole fleet. So we're kind of running a number of trials at the moment that do look at could you use devices to plug
Yeah.
the gaps. That said, obviously, to use connected data is always far preferable than
Yeah.
having to
Of course.
install something. But we're kind of investigating all of the options, right?
All right. So it sounds to me like speed has been important here, right? To get started quickly and prove the value out. But at the same time, you had an eye towards the future in choosing the use cases, showing how it fits into the bigger picture, and also planning the transition to in-house personnel in the future so that you guys can be independent because this is your core business, right? How did you balance the short-term world and the long-term world? And were they the same stakeholders, or did you show some people the short-term part and show others the long-term plan for how this will actually land in production and how it will integrate into our business operations, how it fits into our talent management strategy, etc.?
That's a great question. I think it will depend entirely on the stakeholders, right? So you will have somebody who, in customer services, whose top priority will be what we're going to deliver and how it's going to be a fantastic customer experience.
Okay.
And then we will have people in our technology department who will be far more interested in kind of governance and security and how these things are going to work in the long term. So it is about tailoring the message, and it's also about making sure that we kind of have a close view. We kind of also have a bit of a view of the midterm, and we also have our eye on the future as well.
Okay.
And you're right. I mean, it's a challenge to juggle the three, but I think you kind of have to have a constant view of the horizon.
And I think we're still juggling that challenge. I don't think we'll say that this is
Absolutely.
completely solved.
I mean, it's a working...
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is business as usual for you now. Not saying that it was easy. It's definitely not, but it never ends. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just continuous talking to the right people about the things that they care about, investing in the right projects, and doing those three things that you mentioned over and over again.
It's about, it's precisely, it's basically, once you see the result, when you see some benefits, expectation change or raise. Earlier, you didn't have an expectation. So it would never, we would always be in this cycle of balance, doing this balance, going forward. Yeah.
And it will never end because we're constantly going to be presented by new challenges. The automotive industry and the pace of change is incredible and really exciting. And, you can see autonomous cars and all these things in the future. So I think that I'm quite excited by the fact that we'll probably never stop, really. There'll always be some new challenge or something new to consider or some new opportunity that's presented. So hopefully it'll be a constant state of change.
I mean, that's a lot of learning that our viewers can definitely benefit from. Can you tell us a bit about what are the results like so far, and what are the next phases planned? If you could just recap again,
of course.
what use cases you guys have actually delivered some milestones in, and what that looked like for your customers.
Yeah, of course. So I think, obviously we talked about the two that we started with as proof of concept. We've since evolved the odometer one. We're going to do a scale trial where we register a number of vehicles that have mileage discrepancies every month to really try and impact that business process. We're kind of also exploring what other data attributes would be really valuable for marketing. Particularly as we move to electric vehicles. So if you think you're going to send somebody to pick up a car, it'd probably be quite useful to know how much charge that battery has. Really useful for logistics planning. Predictive maintenance is obviously kind of the big one that we've had a big area of focus over the last 6 months. And I think for me, what was really interesting was the models performed better than we could ever have expected. But actually, some of the challenges are the operational ones. It's actually really hard to get hold of people. So I think the next phase with the maintenance stuff is we're going to start to work out, well, operationally, what could it look like? So who would try and contact the customers? How do we send customers down the right path, right? So there's no point in sending out a breakdown patrol if actually they need a replacement tyre. We want to direct them to the person that should do that, or if it's perhaps the dealer that's managing the vehicle. So we have probably some more trials coming up to understand operationally how could it work. We'll run the models in the background, so they'll continue to improve, and we'll also probably build some more models for other manufacturers. And then what I'm really hopeful for is in kind of the next 6 to 9 months, we'll be able to build a business case that said, right, well, look, if you wanted to do it, then we think you could predict X% of breakdowns, and we could get hold of this many customers. The savings as a result of any early intervention would be this. So it's about building this huge business case, and I think a big part of that this year will be that. We're also going to start to explore things like insurance and how we can develop new products and services to support customers in those areas, and lots of things as well. I think if you think one of our core challenges as a business over the next 10 years is going to be the transition to electric vehicles. We know already from our customers that are driving electric vehicles that there's all sorts of problems, things like navigating the public charging network and accessibility. So how do we smooth
the wait time, the availability, the parking spots, all of it.
So there's a whole load of challenges and some that impact our customers potentially more than kind of the general population. And also as well, I think like the future of mobility, what does that look like, and how do we use the data? I think the electric piece is probably the big one. How do people use their cars, and how can we help smooth that transition? Sorry, that was a really long answer, wasn't it? There's just a lot of stuff going on. To your point, there's a lot of use cases.
I mean, that's what we're looking for. And actually, I think something came to my mind that you brought up, which was insurance, right? You can imagine that your customers specifically might already have mounting healthcare costs, and their insurance premiums might be higher because some insurers might perceive the risk of insuring them, especially with the custom vehicles that they have to be higher. So is there something that you're planning to do to kind of try to help them with that, reduce their insurance premiums, or give them tips on how they could do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so our leases are kind of almost like a just add fuel or just add electric proposition. So it's a really interesting one, because I think whilst the wider marketplace with insurance might choose certain paths, I think we're really interested in how we can incentivize people and engage with people. We would never want to do anything kind of punitive or restrictive for our customers. So we're starting to explore how you could use the data, I guess, like for good, if you like. And also maybe how could you improve the experience of, we'll investigate.
Could you give me an example of, sorry.
No, you go, Ankur.
No, the natural extension that you see around predictive breakdown, the kind of data and analytics that we are creating would could easily also be extended at the time of accidents, especially, to provide help and specialized help for the kind of customer segment we are talking about. So what we'll want to do is the use cases that we are building, we think of a natural extension of those use cases around insurance and providing specialist care when it is needed for these customer base. The other examples in the future about building certain facilities for this customer segment using partners. So there are few trials that MO keeps doing by sharing this data, or sharing this analytics around. You mentioned something about parking spots or
Yeah.
charging points, considering the needs of these customers.
Yeah.
Because they need probably the bigger space
Yeah.
to park their vehicles. So planning that with the councils and the charging suppliers. So there are number of options, number of possibilities in the future, and we continue to explore and shortlist them for the future.
Yeah, there's a lot of caution, I think.
And this is something, coming back a bit more technically, the data foundations that we are building, we are planning those considerations that sharing data with partners in bi-directional way, where there is some data which needs to come from partner or needs to be shared with the partner in a way that they can build they can use this to improve those customers, customer experience. We continue to plan that as part of the business case, part of evolution of this data journey.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can see a lot of challenges ahead, but based on everything you described, super confident that you guys are gonna blow it out of the water, right? And be a lighthouse for others like you who are trying to actually use data for good and have an impact on the world. It's something that we all need. We all have people close to us who have been impacted in a way that's not been inclusive, and there's just a gap. They don't know what to do. There's no way for them to get around or get the services that they need. So there's others out there that are trying to do good as well, but they're facing challenges, unlocking insights from their data, building out their tech team, etc. What kind of advice would you give to somebody starting out and trying to do what you guys have been doing? Not necessarily specifically what Motability does, but just getting that data flywheel going, getting those use cases going, impacting their customers, making sure that they're working backwards from what they're looking for, aligning that with the organization.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think start small is the key thing here, right? So find an area where you think you can deliver some value, find the smallest possible way to test it, and then get on with it as quickly as possible. I think they're the key things. And then very quickly, is this worth pursuing, or actually should we move on to something else? And then you can build from there. And
Ankur, you've done this with several organizations now of different shapes and sizes, different industries. What advice would you give to get the data flywheel going?
So starting small, but having a vision in mind as to where you are going. And once you have it, have a bit of conviction and iterate it as you go forward. And make sure that it does not just become a technology aspiration to build something with data and tech. Make sure that it continues to serve the business that it is built for, and they remain connected. Make sure that the key here is that make sure that business remains connected. Otherwise, we'll build the best of products and will not get used.
So think big, start small, partner with business.
Exactly.
And iterate.
And I think also,
and iterate. Absolutely.
Okay.
And make sure whatever you do is an amazing customer experience.
Okay.
North Star.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end the discussion, right? Keep the customer experience as your North Star. I think this has been really insightful. I hope we can get the word out about what you guys are doing. It's been really great. Thank you guys for coming.
Great to talk
really
about
appreciate
it. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
you.